Let's start with the invocation prayer. Om Agyanam Timmirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksur Urmilidam Yena Tasmai Sri Guruve Namaha Vasudevasutam Devam Kansachanur Mardanam Devaki Param Anandam Krishnam Vande Jagat Guru. Hello everyone, welcome back to this continuing series of talks on Bhagavad Gita. Today is going to be a very interesting, very powerful message we are going to share about what is false ego. What is meant by devotional practice? What do we mean when we say renunciation in action, and how can that be done in practice? These are very important questions that are related to chapter 5 of the Bhagavad Gita, which I'll share with you today. But before we go into the concepts, a little bit of recap. All right, so let's have a bit of a recap of what we covered earlier to take us nicely to this module. So let's now have a quick recap on what we covered on the earlier topic. That is, when we did Jnana Yoga, we talked about how we are going to discuss the concept of engagement in non-fruitive work. As we discussed earlier, there are two types of people. People who are attached engagement, meaning they are doing the work, they are acting, and they are engaged to the results. Another type of people, they are detached disengagement. They are detached from work and they are disengaged from worldly affairs. So these are two types of activities we have. Then Lord Krishna suggested something very interesting to Arjuna. He talked about this concept of detached engagement. That means to be engaged, but detached from the fruits of what you are doing. And this is really a sort of hybrid in between the two parts. Now, we discussed this as a starting point in Karma Yoga. And here it is said that the practitioner involved in the world, but mentally detached. This is a concept that has to do with karma being undertaken on a strong platform of jnana with the intention and mood of bhakti. So there are three things: karma, strong platform of jnana, meaning doing something with good understanding of what we're doing, but with the intention, the purpose, and the mood of bhakti, of service, of love. This is called Buddhi Yoga. So this is what we meant when we were discussing this. Now, we talked about the science of work, and we said work has been done in the context of prescribed duties if we are not to incur sin. And those prescribed duties have been described in the context of Varna, Ashrama, Dharma, that is the social order of life and the spiritual order of life. And work itself has to be done with intentions being considered very carefully. And when the intention of work is discussed, then this can lead to reactions. These reactions can be positive if you're doing karma that is in accordance with prescribed duties. If we're engaging in activities that are not prescribed, it is called vikarma, which gives negative reactions. And akarma means neutral, no reactions. So this is the concept of the science of work, which was highlighted in chapter on Jnana Yoga. So now we understand that these are two different models. One has reaction, one has no reaction, which I said indicated pious activities as per scriptural injunctions are karma. Again, scriptural inductions are sinful, vikarma, for which one does not suffer any reaction is akarma. So when we are going in the basic end of the consciousness graph controlled by the three modes of nature, which is this, we find that we are really at the far end of spirituality. And as we gradually engage in karma, you go into this state where the mind becomes more controlled, And even beyond the state of neutrality, we go beyond the three modes of nature, you're actually engaging in devotional practice. Now, when we were talking last week about Jnana Yoga, we talked about how by acting with a divine purpose, you're only conscious of your divine purpose. Your consciousness becomes divine, which means you are acting in a divine consciousness or Krishna consciousness. In that kind of a divine consciousness, you sacrifice your attachments into the divine purpose for purpose of purification. And this means there is a movement of the modes from laziness, ignorance, to passion, to goodness. So this is a purification process. Now, it is stated earlier in our sessions that without knowledge and purification, two things are needed: knowledge and purification. The path to spiritual advancement is destroyed. Last week we talked about knowledge, right? Let's talk about the word purification. Now, what do you mean by purification? How does this purification actually take place? That'll be very interesting. So we talk about vikarma, where you go down to the lower planets when engaging in sinful activities. Karma, pious activities, you go up to higher planets. But once your good deeds have already been consumed, your bank balance is finished, you come back. And this goes a cycle of birth and death. That means you are stuck in this cycle. Now, when you want to go to Goloka Vrindavan, that means go out and escape the cycle, you have to engage in akarma. So action in the mode of ignorance, passion, or righteousness keeps us in this cycle of birth and death. But action in a mode of renunciation or detachment allows us to engage in akarma. Now, what is important is to understand a little bit deeper. The starting of chapter 5 was very interesting. As usual, Arjuna started with a question. If you remember in chapter 3, Arjuna's question was, which is better, the path of action, karma yoga, or the path of knowledge, jnana yoga? And when Lord Krishna explained to Arjuna what is actually karma yoga and discussed jnana itself, knowledge, and that made Arjuna even more curious, because from the Lord's explanation, it became clear that karma yoga actually is a very wide area. It covers selfless performance of action and renunciation of action. Selfless performance of action is when we do something with a divine purpose. We sacrifice what we are doing. Renunciation of yoga is karma sannyasa yoga. So here we are talking of renunciation of action. We don't do anything. But selfless performance of action is renunciation through action. Both actually are renunciation. One, we renounce through action. While doing things, we are renouncing. And the other, we are renouncing the action itself. But that sounds a little bit confusing, right? How can I renounce? I can give up through action. That is because we must understand the words very carefully. To appreciate the terminology, we must realize that action being done in the mood of renunciation or detachment is what we mean by renunciation through action. The renunciation is not renunciation of work. We don't stop work, but renunciation of attachment to the results of work. What we get from work. We neither like nor dislike. We don't love, we don't hate, but we just work as a matter of our duty. Okay, that's fine. So if I do something, there's action, there's going to be consequence, there's going to be result. That result is something that is going to be something I like or don't like. So if I study hard, I pass the exam, I like. I study hard, I fail the exam, I don't like. So this means I'm focusing on studying for the result. And that result is something I'm looking for, not so much the study. So then When we say renunciation here means we are renouncing the results. We are not interested. We are not concerned. We are not worried about whether we pass or fail. We just focus on the work. That's very interesting. Karma and vikarma has karmic reaction. But how is it? Our karma has no karmic reaction. How is that possible? What is the science behind this? How can that be the case? I mean, we know there's such thing called law of karma. Law of karma means whatever we do, there's a reaction. If I throw a ball against the wall, it hits the wall, it comes back. If I throw something up, it's going to come down. Doesn't matter where I am, what time, who throws. As long as I throw, it comes down. That's like the law of gravity. If I jump off a cliff, I'm going to fall down. That's the law of gravity. Are we saying that law of karma doesn't apply to certain people and applies to other people? How can that be the case? It's called a law. Law should apply. Are you saying there's certain people, when they jump off the cliff, they won't fall? They're just floating there? How is this possible? That is something we have to think about very carefully. So I want you all to think, how can a situation arise where we do things, but there's no karmic reaction at all? Not possible, right? Okay, now think carefully. Do you have a soul? Anybody would like to say no? You can unmute and tell me. If everybody doesn't unmute, that means all of you agree you have a soul, right? Sure? That's where you're wrong. You don't have a soul. You are the soul. You have a body. It took me a long time to realize this. We keep saying, you know, I have got a soul, you have got a soul, take care of my soul, your soul, my soul, my I. The word my, I is where the problem lies. We have a body, but we are the soul. Now, that brings us to another interesting question. If I'm the soul, then why is it I'm not in a state of bliss? Why do I suffer? Why do I get upset? Why do I fight with my spouse? Why do I get upset with my children? I mean, I'm supposed to be blissful. It's soul, right? If we are the soul, we are eternal, we are cognizant, we are blissful, but we are not. And how can this be the case? Now that's again something we have to think about. The reason we are not blissful is because the bliss has been covered, contaminated, blocked. We cannot see it. It's all full of impurities. If the consciousness is impure, the bliss cannot come out. It's like having a torchlight, switching it on and putting it in a bag in a dark room. The torchlight will not show light because it is in a bag, it's blocked. Now, what is blocking this soul from displaying bliss? Well, the soul is in the body, that's for sure. We know that. Okay, so what's this body? What is this body all about, this gross body we have? Well, there are four factors on the body. We have the material, there are certain components, certain functions, and nature. Let's look at the material. Material or gross body is space, air, fire, water, earth. Fine. What are the components? Head, hands, legs, central body. Okay. Function, it's a temporary residence of the soul used to transcend with the world, transact with the world. That's why we have the body. So what's the nature? Nature of the body is subject to change from birth, childhood, old age, limited natural life, 50, 60, 70 years, and is visible to everyone. That's fine. That's the gross body. Okay. Apart from the gross body, we have the subtle body. What is the subtle body? Subtle body is obviously the soul. And the soul is covered by the subtle body, which is within the gross body. It's like an inner garment of the soul. It's not perceived by the gross senses. We cannot perceive it. We cannot touch it, feel it, smell it. It's inside. And the subtle body accompanies the soul at the time of death. So when we die, the gross body is left behind, but the subtle body, which consists of the mind, the intelligence, the ego, follows the soul. But that is something we must understand. Okay, now let's understand this even better. What is this ego, mind, and intelligence? What has this got to do with us? And why is it that seems to be a problem with regard to feeling blissful? Now, if we analyze very carefully, we find that we are comprised of basically the soul, which is the God principle within each of us. Fine. And there is this mental body or the mind, which has feelings, emotions, desires, and the causal body. What causes us to think like that, to feel like that? Sometimes called the intellect, decision-making process, and reasoning ability. But within all this is the supra-causal or the subtle ego. The feeling that we are separate from God, that we are different, that we are unique, we are not part of Him. That is the supra-natural cause or the subtle ego. And all this comprise the vital body. This is how we exist. This is what we are comprised of. Now let's analyze this very carefully. The 5 organs of knowledge, sight, sound, speech, whatever organs we have that we can see, we can hear, we can talk, we can think, those organs of knowledge receives and sends data to the mind. And the mind takes this data, we hear words, we see things, we taste something, we can feel things, sends it to the intellect. And the intellect sends solutions and make decisions. So the intellect is like the CEO of the company, makes a decision and tells the managers what to do. Then the managers tells the workers, go do it. That's the organ of action. That's your legs, your hands, your sense of feeling, those things. Now, when the mind is getting instructions and informing the organs, it stores things in the memory. And the intellect can retrieve it from the memory as well. All this is fine. What is the role of the ego? The ego identifies with action and creates the I sense. It's I saw this, I did this, I did that. It is a tendency to bring everything to the I, me, mine. Now, when you look at it, I must be the center of attention is what we all usually think about. I should come first. She should love me. Why am I not being adored? How dare they not value me? He should love me. They should notice me. These are things that arise from the I must be center of attention mindfully. And the root of this is vanity, conceit, pride, ego, paranoia, insecurity. And when we have this kind of obsession, it fuels the enemies of the mind: envy, anger, illusion, greed, lust, fuels it. And the mind is always going from this point to that point. So these are the root cause of this I focus, ego focus. So as I said earlier, the laws of karma should apply to everyone. So is the law of gravitation. But how is it when we do things, there are times when reaction doesn't take place? That's a very important consideration. But to understand that, let's go into the concept of action and reaction. Okay? What is reaction? Reaction means act again. All right? So what is the relationship between one action and another action? What is that happens in between is something we're going to analyze. All right? Okay, when there is an action, that action leaves an impression in the mind. It's like you're walking in a lake. As you walk, you're leaving footprints behind. That's impression. Impression in your mind that leads to a certain tendency to do something. And that tendency to do something provokes a certain thought pattern, which leads to action. So for instance, if somebody hurt you, that action, somebody hurt you, it leaves an impression in your mind, feeling hurt. And you have a tendency to hurt others. You start thinking about releasing that and you start hurting other people. So action, reaction. Somebody hurt me, I hurt others. Because that action has left an impression in the mind. That impression is there, it's always there. It's going to lead to a situation that is going to lead to certain thoughts. This tendency we have is called vasana. And these vasanas are not just due to impressions in this lifetime. Because the mind, intelligence, and ego follows the soul. So even if certain things happen in the past, it has left impressions in the mind. Then we develop certain tendencies in this lifetime that leads to certain thought patterns and action. But this is not all negative. Sometimes even positive actions can lead to a positive impression, certain tendencies. You know, if you pray every day, it leaves a nice impression in your mind. You have a tendency to continue praying and you're thinking of praying first thing in the morning. So that prayer, that meditation, if you enjoy listening to the Bhagavad Gita, it leaves a nice impression in your mind. You have a tendency to hear it again. Every time there's a talk on the Gita or anything on religion, you say, I want to hear. So that thought pattern is something that occurs leading to that action. So this action and reaction can occur for the negative as well as positive. Okay, so karma leads to samskara, impression, that relates to vasana, tendency, leading to vritti, thought pattern, and again karma. So that is the relationship. Now, I'm going to take this in the context of the vicious cycle of samskara. When we take action that is very selfish, that means we do something for ourselves, it leaves vasanas or tendencies that are very selfish. This will lead to very selfish desires and selfish thoughts. So then you get caught with a selfish thought, you take selfish action, again, more vasanas, more desires, and this is what we mean by action, reaction, action, reaction. You get bound to material values. Material desires lead to selfish thoughts and actions, binding us further to material work, creating selfish vasanas, increasing the pap account and stop accumulation of punya. This means negative karmas lead to negative vasanas, lead to negative actions. Just like, you know, we eat something and then our reaction is we develop a vasana for it and then we desire more and we eat some more and it keeps going on and on and on and on. So when we have this selfish, meaning we want to do things for ourselves, enjoy our taste, enjoy seeing something, doing something for ourselves, it develops that vasana and tendencies and desires to continue doing it. So the vasana is reinforced when one is affected by the results of action, when one hates or likes the result of action. When I do something, I like it, it reinforces the vasana. When I don't like it, it reinforces that vasana as well. But if we do it the other way around, we eliminate vasana. Vasana is eliminated when one remains neutral to the result or action, when one neither hates nor likes the result of action. So if I don't like a result or I don't hate a result, it eliminates that reaction. So if we look at it here, very interesting. Huh? Look at the cycle of vasanas, action, you do something, you get the fruits. This fruit will lead to the vasanas, impressions, desires, thoughts, action. This is a cycle, right? Now, when you engage in viskama karma through renunciation of the results of action, the karmic cycle is broken here, as the desire for self-fulfilling results cease to exist. So action, results, stop. There's no vasana, desires, thoughts, because it cuts here. Why? Because it's our niskama karma. That means niskama. Niskama means no desire. That kind of action. So as a result, there is no accumulation of vasanas occurring, and the karmic cycle is broken due to the practice of akarma. Now you know why, when we engage in akarma type activities, which is doing things without desiring the results, there is no reaction. And this breaks the cycle of karma. No, but we always do this. This continues. Why? Why do we even have this tendencies for selfish desires? What is the root cause? If we are pure souls, why do we engage in selfish activities? The answer is this. Initially, we are created by the Lord, and then we forget our divinity due to avidya. And then you start engaging and trying to live in your own, by coming up with your own identity or your ego. And the ego will relate to different types of elements, which reinforces the thought that you are the doer, and you will engage in activities resulting in certain actions. And so it's because of the forgetfulness, avidya, about your true relationship. You are engaged in this material world and you are seeking your own identity. You forget your relationship with the Lord. You try to become your own boss. When you forget, when you have avidya of your true relationship with the Creator, then you develop these egos. And these egos continue to bind us in this vicious cycle. So when we have that belief that I am the doer, I am the proprietor, I am the enjoyer, then the grace is blocked due to the ego. That ego is the one that is saying, I am the doer, I am the proprietor, I am the end receiver. And because of the ego is so strong, it blocks the soul. It blinds the soul from the true relationship between the soul and the super soul that resides in the heart. So this means essentially the false ego covers the soul and obscures the ability to realize the presence of the Lord. We cannot, because it's blocked. It's so strong. And that is why the selfish desires exist, because we are always thinking about, I am the enjoyer. I must enjoy. It is my life. Because I own this house, I own this car, I own this place. I did the hard work. And this is all coming from ego, which is the false self. But the you, the true you, is the true self. And these are the big differences between the two. Now, because of the ego, we engage in selfish activities for enjoyment of personal senses. But if we realize that this is false, I am not this body, I am not going to live forever, these things I have don't belong to me. If we come to realize that, then we start engaging in devotional service for the enjoyment of the Lord. And that's when the bliss of service, devotional service, begins to emerge. It's written in the Bhagavad Gita that karasati, struggling or grappling hard, is very significant. The conditioned soul is bound up as though shackled on iron chains. He's bound up by the false ego, and the mind is the chief agent which is driving him in material existence. This is chapter 15, verse 7. So it's very clearly stated by Lord Krishna that it is the false ego that is the root cause of souls being bound in this karmic cycle and cannot be liberated. Because of the soul that is misidentifying itself with the body, the realization that the Lord resides is not there. But it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 61, the Supreme Lord is situated in everyone's heart, O Arjuna, and is directing the wanderings of all living entities who are seated on as a machine made of material energy. So everybody has within him or her the super soul. And this is in the Bhagavad Gita. But we don't see it. We don't realize it. To us, everybody is just everybody. We don't see that divinity within everyone. But if we can see the divinity, then this is a great level of advancement. Because one who sees the super soul accompanying the individual soul in all bodies, and who understands that neither the soul nor the super soul is ever destroyed, actually sees. But this is something that is necessary for spiritual advancement. It's also very important to realize the difference between the soul and the super soul. There's a big difference. The difference is that the soul living results karma, whereas the super soul is called the Paramatma. So the soul is called the Jivatma and the super soul is called the Paramatma. The soul is very small, very infinite. It's like a drop in the ocean, whereas the super soul is infinite. It's like the ocean itself. The soul is cognizant of its body. Soul knows about the body in which it is, but the super soul knows about every living entity's body. The soul is actually loving service, but this is the loving master. The soul is a loving servant. The super soul is a loving master, indwelling loving master. So the soul is something that resides within the body, but the super soul resides all over the world, every part of the universe. So there's a big difference between this and this. One is infinite, one is finite, one resides within the body, one resides in all bodies, one is small, one is huge, one is the servant, one is the Lord. So we have to make this very important distinction. And when we realize that a super soul exists within us as Param Atma, then we realize also that whatever we do is not necessarily due to us. Apparently, according to the Bhagavad Gita, there are three doers to every action: the soul, the super soul, and the body. The soul is called the desiring doer. It comes from the soul. I wish I could hear the Bhagavad Gita today. I wish I can speak about the glories of the Lord today. I wish. That comes from my soul. Those of you listening, it came from your soul. And you know something? Lord Krishna in your heart facilitated. Yes, you deserve to hear the Bhagavad Gita. You qualify. It is your karmic balance that is very positive. And you qualify because the super soul allowed me to conduct this session. And what happened? I'm doing it and you are hearing it. That is called the active doer. So it's not that I'm doing it or you are hearing. No, it has to come from somewhere. It has to come from a desire, which is from the soul. And then that desire has to be validated, facilitated by a super soul. So the super soul actually permits us to do certain things only if we qualify. And sometimes we don't have the good or correct karmic balance. For us to do something, we will not be able to do it. It's just like you have to engage the gear to run the car. Just starting the engine won't run the car. So that's a very important point to understand, because there are ultimately three doers. But what's happening is this. The soul is covered by the false ego, obscures the existence of the super soul. So, as a result, the person believes he is the doer. Oh, I did it. I passed the exam. I made the money. I closed the deal. I did this. I did that. So that's because of the ego. So why do we have ego? That's because every human being has got defects. And there are four main defects. The first defect is committing mistakes. Why do we commit mistakes? Because we have imperfect senses. And we have a propensity to cheat others. But the biggest problem we have is becoming illusioned, thinking that we are the body, thinking that we are the doers, we are the enjoyers, we are the proprietors. And that is a defect of the human entity. And we must recognize that defect. So what do? We have to escape from this illusion. How? Well, that's why we have the Bhagavad Gita. It's teaching us how. It's teaching us how. It's teaching us how to undertake prescribed duties so that the physical body can be taken care of. We don't do things wrong that can affect our physical body, our mental state, our emotional state. That's karma yoga. That's why Lord Krishna said, do your prescribed duty. What is prescribed for you? Don't do something that's not prescribed for you. And to keep your mental state in a balanced manner, don't look for the results. Go for niskama karma yoga. That's to maintain the mental state. But the intellect needs to be strengthened to ensure the mind is controlled. And that intellect strengthening process requires us to work for a divine purpose. And that is what is covered in Jnana Yoga. So you see, every element is being addressed through this process. Now, one thing we must understand, that the subtle ego is even more subtle than the intellect. So even after engaging in karma yoga, niskama karma yoga, jnana yoga, you can take care of the intellect, the mind, you can take care of the physical body, but you cannot handle the sublime, the subtle ego. Because subtle ego is even more. You cannot discriminate. Intelligence means ability to discriminate. You can discriminate up to a certain level, but the ego is beyond that. So what to do now? How do you deal with the subtle ego? You need to go through a process of sannyasa yoga. That is renunciation. You got to renounce the ego. That's what you have to do. And that is the process which is covered in chapter 5. It's so wonderful. Chapter 3, Karma Yoga, Niskamaka, chapter 4, chapter 5. How so beautifully this subject is being discussed. You see, our destiny is to rot in the material world, but Krishna comes to change our destiny. He comes to change, therefore we have to surrender our free will. So due to nature of mind, it is difficult to remain detached to matter. Detachment to matter can only be sustained through attachment to spirit. So in short, detachment from materialism comes by attachment to spiritual understanding of a higher attachment to spirit or divine. In other words, you cannot detach from matter and stay detached. You will fall. You have to attach something higher. To get rid of a lower taste, you need to develop higher taste. That is why we can get rid of impurities of the heart by turning our consciousness towards Lord Krishna. With mind, we can think of Krishna and project our consciousness towards it. Basically, when working with some sense of higher understanding, a higher connection, a higher purpose, a divine purpose, the motivation is not selfishness, it is selflessness. You don't exist. You are relinquishing your ego. Now, when we devote ourselves to Lord Krishna and we see Lord Krishna in us and in everyone around us, that devotion means we are doing things for the Lord and to everyone else. That is called selfless action. That's why prescribed duties are needed. You see, when we help others, the people we help will send us blessings, positive vibrations. These blessings will purify the consciousness. When the consciousness is purified, the mind is controlled. And when the mind is controlled, we focus on Lord Krishna. That's how the whole benefit of selfless service or devotional service is. Because by performing selfless service, you please everyone with your service and you become dear to all. Because everyone is satisfied with your work, you will get the goodwill of other people and you will get blessings and positive vibes from other people. And because you get these blessings, you become pure in your consciousness. And when you're pure in your consciousness, your mind is controlled. And because your mind is controlled, your senses also come under control. And because your mind and senses always fix on Krishna, there is no chance of deviating from Krishna. So such a person never deviates from the path of Krishna consciousness. This is why we have to shift away from selfish to selfless. So by doing that, the contaminated consciousness becomes clear. So before performing devotional service, the soul is contaminated. After performing devotional service, it becomes clear. So this is a gradual process of purification of consciousness through selfless service. It is not immediate. It takes time. It's gradual. So what we are doing really is redirecting the path of consciousness. You see, the soul can be redirected, can be routed through gross material body to the world. That's called Jagruti. Or it can be routed to the spiritual realm. That's called Turiya. Either this way towards divinity or this way towards the gross body. When it is routed towards the gross body to satisfy the senses, satisfy the mind, and the intelligence is weakened, we are engaging in selfish desires for the body, for the senses. Then we get caught by lust or desire to satisfy our senses, and that leads to a duality of mind. But if we are moving in a different direction, when engaging in selfless desires, there is pure love coming from the heart. And the mind becomes in a state of equanimity. Here, there is a lot of acceptance. We accept the fact that we are servants of the Lord. We accept the fact that some people are different from us. We accept the fact that things are happening we have no control over. We just accept whatever happens in His name. It is His world. We are just His instruments. But when we are engaging in selfish desires, we have many expectations, likes, dislikes, and we are spending all our life trying to sense this expectation. So when you move from expectation to acceptance, things becomes very blissful. So that is the movement we have to go, process of gradual purification through sannyas yoga. So the word renunciation here actually means the death of false ego. And that is the whole process of renunciation, devotion, moving away from selfish desires to breaking those desires altogether, just working due to prescribed duty for the welfare of the world. And the process of doing that purifies the consciousness. I'd like to share with you a very nice story. A man once told Buddha, "I want happiness." The Buddha replied, "First remove I, that's ego. Then remove want, that's desire. And now all you are left with is happiness." It's so thought-provoking. Last week's class, I talked about having a divine purpose. It's like a rocket, with the faith, you have to beat the gravity, which is doubt and material desires. So when the rocket goes up to the space, it hovers at the surface of the earth. Now remember, it's hovering there means it can come back if it's unable to escape the gravitational pull. But at least it has escaped the gravitational pull. When it has escaped the gravitational pull, that is the state of neutrality to all human beings, situations, and matter. That is the Brahman. So first is negative. We go all the way to zero. But that is not the final aim. The final aim is, of course, to reach the Lord. But to reach the Lord, we must reach the state of neutrality. So first there is negativity to neutrality. And from neutrality, we got to move to positive. But that process of movement requires renunciation of the ego. So liberation through Ashtanga Yoga is when we move from neutrality all the way up to divinity. That's when you become free from desire, fear, and anger. So Ashtanga Yoga is a practice where you meditate, go through a number of steps, yama, niyama, asana. These are steps you go through. And how do you perform is indicated in Bhagavad Gita. And how the Ashtanga Yogi helps. That is actually for super soul realization. That's Ashtanga Yoga. That is to realize the super soul. The Bhagwan realization, which is the super soul, also can be realized through Krishna consciousness. Realization is Krishna consciousness is a gradual process of renunciation. It's very interesting when you look at Ashtanga Yoga. Yama is having restraints at a very basic level. It means it's coming from outside. You are not allowed to do many things. That's the first. Then you develop your own observance. Niyama means from yourself, your discipline. Then it goes to asana, pranayama. Now, all these are actually renunciation through action. You're renouncing your desires, your wants, your thoughts, your feelings through action. By doing these things, by controlling, you're renouncing. But once you pass a certain stage, then you go through renunciation through inaction. So it's very interesting. Renunciation at the initial stage for the preliminary people is true action, which is sannyas yoga. Once you have passed that stage, then you don't do anything. You just focus, concentrate, meditate, and you engage in spiritual absorption. Now, the last part of this topic talks about what is called the peace formula on the platform of liberation. In verse 29, it says, a person in full consciousness of Krishna, who knows Krishna as the supreme controller and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from pangs of material desires. We have to know this. And we can only know this if we are in full consciousness of Krishna. So basically, the peace formula says, to get peace in life, you must know that the Bhoktaram, the person who is the beneficiary of all sacrifices, is Lord Krishna. He is Surdram, Sarva Bhutaram, is the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities. And he is Sarva Loke Maheshwaram, supreme proprietor of all planets and demigods. He is the supreme proprietor. If we understand that, there will be no more wars. It's not a question of Zelensky talking about Ukraine or Putin talking about Ukraine belongs to Russia. They don't understand that everything belongs to Lord Krishna. So why are they fighting? So there's no more war in this world, if we understand that. It's very direct relevance to today's life. All the sacrifices we're doing is for him. Ultimately goes to him. Sacrifice for family, for children, for society is for him because he is the beneficiary. And we cannot survive without a well-wisher. And the well-wisher who stays with us for eternity, not for this lifetime. This lifetime, well-wisher could be parents, could be family, limited, but only for this lifetime. But who is the well-wisher for all eternity, for every time we live, for every moment we exist, for all eternity is Lord Krishna. So we are feeling very comforted. And that brings peace to the mind to know that there's a well-wisher in our hearts who owns everything and who is ultimately the enjoyer of everything. So this is a very lovely ending to this. So very quickly, this chapter 5 is very interesting because it talks of niskama karma initially, because Arjuna inquires, is renunciation superior or working devotion? Krishna replies that devotional work is superior to the renunciation of work. One who detached from results of his work is the one who is truly renounced, detached from results. So results of both ultimately the same. Devotional service is superior, for devotee can quickly achieve Krishna. See, it's how quick we can do it. What is the path of least resistance? And when we do this, there are many positive results that we get. Of course, once we go through this process, the next stage is Ashtanga Yoga. But Ashtanga Yoga can be very difficult. You can resolve this by going through continuously giving up your selfish desires. But to do that, you must understand that we're doing it to gain peace. And what is the peace formula? Peace formula is the realization that Lord Krishna is a supreme proprietor. There's no need to fight, guys. Supreme beneficiary of all work. Ultimately, it goes back to him, and supreme friend of all. He is the friend of all for all eternity. So this is chapter 5, which we should think about very carefully because it is something that is very close to all of us. We have forgotten our relationship with the Lord because our tendency to think more about ourselves. The ego is so strong. So how do we relinquish this ego? We can't do it through our intelligence because intelligence is not able to deal with the ego. Ego is even more subtle than intelligence. So we need to be humble, humility. When we humble ourselves with humility, the ego disappears. That is why In chapter 4, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna, seek a guru with all humility. And when there is humility from the heart, ego disappears. When there's humility all around, anger disappears. If you think about it, humility is like the extinguisher for all the enemies of the mind. But we cannot be humble as long as we cling on to our ego. So when we chant every day without fail, we are chanting with all humility. When we pray, we are praying with humility. We are begging for forgiveness. And that humility does not reveal him in us. It uncovers that contamination within us. And when we start practicing that humility by offering service to others without expecting anything in return, gradually the process of purification takes place. And that is why the traditions of respect to elders, or putting your head on the feet of elders, is great traditions which reinforces the need for humility to eliminate ego. And this whole process ultimately helps us reach that platform of realization of Lord Krishna. I hope you enjoyed this session. It is something that is really worth thinking about. Now we know why there is such thing called akarma. It's because we break the cycle of karma, action, reaction, desires. There is no desire, so that cycle is broken. So whatever is in the mind imprints do not increase. But those are already there. How do you remove that? By purification of consciousness, by serving others, by being humble. And that will eliminate that dust. And ultimately we become better. I believe we have been doing this for about, I think this is the 8th session now. We should take a short break. So I'm going to take a break next week. Let's call this a semester break. We'll resume the week after. Thank you very much for bearing with me for all this time. And if there's any questions, or anybody likes to comment, I'll be more than glad to take your questions. Anyone? You want to key something in the chat box? I do hope you're calling your friends to come to attend as well. Do try, please. And as I've always said, the best place to go to and spend your time is with the Lord. And the Geeta Ashram is always there for you. We're always happy to have you there. And I look forward to seeing you all there coming Sunday. All right? So if there's nothing else, I want to thank you very much. There'll be no class next week. I will send a recording of the sessions to you all. And I do hope that you will continue attending the sessions and sharing it with your friends. All right? If that is all, thank you very much. Jai Shri Krishna, Jai Gurudev.